Today, I want to talk about the hidden cost of bad Salesforce training, the kind that drains productivity, confidence, morale, and revenue. At the same time, leaders look at databases and dashboards and wonder, why is my Salesforce not delivering the value? Why I'm not getting what my development team promised? And in this talk, I don't really want to talk about blaming the users themselves. I'm not going to talk about Salesforce being too complex. It is a complex beast, but I don't want to touch that on it here. And I'm definitely not going to talk about building more users. What I do want to talk about is, what have you done as a business to make sure your users use the system properly? How is your onboarding process? How is your onboarding training? What do you do during the year when there's new features coming out? What do you roll out to your users? Do you do refresher training or not? How do you onboard new users throughout the year? There's one thing about big go lives and big changes, but throughout the years, new users come in, people are leaving, people are coming, people changing functionality. How do you deal with that? Are there processes in place that you actually help your users to make sure they use the system correctly? Because training is not just that one at the beginning and that's it. It's ongoing, constantly, every single week, every single month. There's new features happening, new users happening, and we need to make sure that we train our users correctly. Because if we don't, that has a whole range of consequences. The thing is with Salesforce, and Salesforce is very good also at marketing in that way, is that Salesforce is intuitive. Yeah, it is. It's simple. It's an interface on a computer. You click on some buttons, things are happening, and in sales, it's not difficult. I click on an account and click a new account button, and I add in my information, and I click save, and hey, presto, I have a new account. But does that follow the ways of working we do it as an organization? What do we have as requirements when we create a new account? Do we need to notify anybody? Do we need to send messages around? Do we have a compliance team, a finance team that needs to be informed and needs to do stuff? That in itself, you often don't see when you just look at the system. If you just look at the interface, it doesn't always call out that you have to do all these other things. And if we don't train our users on that and don't explain them the processes, explain them how to do certain things, then you get potentially bad data in the system. And we all hate bad data because it impacts our reporting, our functionality, and it has a whole cascading effect throughout the whole business. And so just by giving the people maybe a brief introduction, say, that's it, do it yourself, you get problems down the line. And so you need to make sure that from the beginning, you explain to people correctly how to use the system. Now, of course, that's where we can do automation to avoid certain pitfalls, but you can't automate everything. Part of it is process. Part of it is telling people how to use the system alongside their ways of working throughout the day, throughout the week. And just letting people talk with themselves and figuring it out and then training each other up to a point that that works. But if bad habits creep in, it's very difficult to get them out. Imagine there's one user who just never notifies the finance team that they create a new account. And they just get away with it. They never get called out. It's just at the back end, finance knows, this user never tells us, we know what to do. And that user trains another user. And that user therefore also gets this bad habit of not notifying finance. And then it cascades to the next user and the next user. And before you know it, finance has a lot more work to fix the information. And all users having this bad habit of not notifying them. So you need to make sure that training is contained in a way that you make sure that all your users get the right standpoint, the right starting point, to make sure that your system gets the right information, the right processes around it. Just letting people figure it out themselves, it works, but up to a point, you have to make sure that the way they use the system is the way you want to use it as an organization, not the way users can get away with it. Now, on the back of that, let's just start talking about money. We never want to talk about money, and especially in the Salesforce world, we're very hesitant to talk about, expenses of projects, how much things are costing, or actually what the costs are of bad habits, bad data, etc. But it is so fundamental in how we use the system and how businesses get the most out of their system. The biggest challenge we have is, users wasting time in the system by re-entering data, by fixing things they have done wrong. And we want to make sure we avoid that. And that's why we do good training and good education constantly to make sure they don't go to that way. But if it happens, it can have big consequences. Imagine your dashboards and your reports. Now, maybe you have something about opportunities in your organization. and you want to track, what the value of the opportunity is, what the status is, and maybe people only fill in half the data and then push it through the system. And you then have a dashboard as a manager, and you look at it and think like, well, hang on a minute, my whole team is actually falling behind on the KPIs. But maybe they're not, they just haven't updated the system correctly. And so you as a manager are going to execute information and brief the wider business on where we're at on actually false data. And that can be a problem, not just for you as a manager and as an organization, but throughout the line. At the same time, you might have admins fixing all kinds of mistakes because people do things wrongly. And we then start to see, okay, we need to fix the system, we need to add in more information in there, more fields, more automation processes. Well, actually, a lot of it is mainly down to actually have we educated our users properly in what information to put into the system. And this can have far-reaching consequences. Imagine our users waste about 5 minutes a day in doing wrong data. They have to go back in, fix something, update something that they could have prevented by having some proper education and proper explanation. Well, we let that slip, and so the users do bad things. And so maybe we have about 100 users, and every single day they spend about 5 minutes of their workday fixing the issues that they caused. Now, across 100 users, that adds up to about 500 minutes wasted a day. If you tally that up to about a month, it's about 10,000 wasted minutes. That's basically the same equivalent to one full-time user wasting their time. If you think about the value of that, it can become enormous. Because a lot of companies have more than 100 users. And maybe you have more wasted time or less wasted time. But if you just think about the numbers you're talking about, it's one full-time person basically constantly fixing their errors. That's just enormous. And how we can fix it is by having some proper training, by actually doing some explaining, having some education, and making sure we keep telling people why and how we use the system. Now, we don't just talk about money, because of course, as a business, you think about the end numbers, you think about capital, you think about ROI. But on the other side is also the users themselves. If they need to keep on going back and fixing information, or they keep being told, well, the data is bad, you're not doing what you say you're doing, the performance doesn't come through, it's going to touch upon their morale. They're going to be annoyed, they're going to be demotivated, they're going to be frustrated with the system, they're going to potentially even maybe feel stupid, even though they actually are not. It's all because we haven't actually educated them properly on how to use the system. And if they start feeling that way, they might think like, okay, well, I'm going to do really the minimum in the system because I don't want to do anything wrong. I want to make sure that everything I do is correctly. So in a way, they might start avoiding doing things. It might also start to take them far longer to do things because they want to triple check that they do everything correctly. And so Salesforce then becomes this enormous, annoying thing that they have on a day-to-day basis. You get resistance. You get the messaging from just like, I don't like Salesforce. I hate it. Why do we have it? And potentially even they might not start using it anymore and try to go back to the old ways of working. It might have been spreadsheets, emails, etc. Which then completely defies the reason why you actually as an organization implemented Salesforce in your organization. And it's really important that we avoid that. And like I said, the easiest way, and that's why I talk about it as a trainer, is giving them education, helping them. And that's not just always about clicking in the right area. It's not always about sitting for hours in meetings and presentations and training sessions, educating them. It's sometimes about little tips, help, understanding them that this is why we're doing it. And if you do it this way, this will be your benefit. The best thing you do as an organization when you launch Salesforce is telling to your users, this is going to be your cost saver, going to take you a lot of time away from doing the mundane, from the admin. You spend more time on doing the things that are important. For example, for a salesperson is selling, for a case person is being on a call with the customer, actually helping them, instead of spending a lot of time in the system, clicking buttons and going through things. And also explain to them that they have the power to do stuff. It's up to them to make sure the information is right. It's in their hands. They have the power to make sure, for example, especially as a salesperson, to make sure that their information is tracked correctly and that they can show up and say, yes, these are my achievements. You can do that through big training, but also, like I said, do small things, like giving them little tips, little nuggets, maybe weekly messages, being in team meetings and telling them for 5 minutes, like, hey, have you thought about this? All of that to make sure that they don't resent Salesforce, but they're going to see it as a useful tool to do on their day-to-day basis and make their life easier. And for you as an organization, get out of it what you need to. Now, one of the biggest challenges I have as a trainer, and hopefully as an organization, you're not at that stage, but is the go live area, the go live trap. Often a lot of companies, if you have already launched Salesforce, you might have done it maybe 1, 2, 3 years ago, or maybe you're in the process or planning to, and often training is forgotten. We spend a lot of time in working with developers, with analysts, with project managers, technical architects, etc., to building this absolutely fantastic system. It costs a lot of money to make this system work the way we think we want it to work. Maybe do a lot of time on UAT, maybe it goes glowingly to UAT, but then what we forget at the end is actually telling to the users, this is what we have, this is how we're going to use it. It's the biggest problem I come across the industry. I think it's the biggest problem a lot of people are facing, because then we go live, then after go live, you get people not using it properly, you get errors creeping in, people are complaining, and it could be avoided by doing a proper educational period, a proper training period to tell to users, this is why we do it. And for me, training should not be at go live. Education and training your people should start at the beginning of your project. To me, training is more than just sitting in a room and telling people where to click. In training, also, we often call it change management or enablement. From the beginning, you're going to educate your people and saying, this is what's going to come. This is what's going to be the impact on your ways of working. And this is why it's so good that we're using it. Make sure they feel confident that they log into the system, they can do what they need to do. And hopefully some extra nice features that they never had before, but are really a benefit for their ways of working. Leaving training to the end, making it very short and quick, maybe even do things like just demos and not giving people hands-on. If you do all of that, you set yourself up to failure. Make sure that from the beginning you have a proper education, enablement, and training plan. Most people, we as technical people, and I always say we because I'm part technical and I'm of course part of the Salesforce ecosystem, we sit in the system day in, day out. For us, it's simple. For most end users, it isn't. And so for them, we have to explain why. It's going to be a massive impact on how they normally worked. There are companies are still using Excel spreadsheets. Imagine you do everything on the day they work on an Excel spreadsheet, and then all of a sudden you're going to use Salesforce. And you might say, well, oh yeah, but so easy. You go to click and it all works well. But it's the process from changing from one thing to the next. It's a massive impact on the way people work. All of a sudden, the things they used to do, they can't do anymore. And it doesn't matter that it's now a nice, interface on a browser, and I can click buttons and everything is flashing and goes nice. For them, it's a complete different way how they used to work. And so we have to take them by the hand up to a point and help them understand this is why you do this. And you can't just do that, a week before go live with some rush training. It needs time. It needs embedment. It needs proper planning. And we need to help them really understand how you can do it. And it needs to be consistent messaging. Throughout the whole process, we have to make sure we bring the right message around so that we also, as an organization, don't conflict ourselves. Whereby 1 month we promise one thing, the next month we promise something else. We have to make sure we're consistent in our messaging, consistent across the board, so people have confidence that when Salesforce comes, it's a good thing to use. Another big challenge I see when people are using Salesforce, especially when it's been embedded in a couple of years, is that we all know Salesforce constantly changes. And there's constantly new features coming out, at least 3 times a year. And you as an organization might even have maybe sprint planning, might do releases every 4 or maybe every 8 weeks, something like that. Now, what do you do with that information? How do you educate your users that these changes are happening? Do you just send them an email, if at all? You just tell them, yeah, things have been fixed. If you bring in new stuff, how do you tell your users? Is this, again, just an email? What is your planning around that? With that is not just how you educate your existing users on what's coming out, but also when a new user comes in the organization, what kind of information do you tell them? Is your old onboarding information from your go live still up to date? Or has that all been 3 years old and all the new information has not been integrated? If you're using videos, are they still relevant? Are those processes still in place? Do the interface still look the same? We're constantly changing how we look and how the system works. new buttons up here, buttons taken away, fields move. Now, up to a point, you can tell that to your users. But if that's a drastic way how it was in the information, in the training guides versus live, when they go into the system, it will cause a lot of confusion. So as an organization, what is your plan? How do you deal on a monthly basis with new information coming out? How do you keep your information up to date? How do you make sure in that, again, you keep consistent? Do you pre-warn people? Do you just tell them after the fact? If it's a big release, how do you help your people? You need to have a proper plan around that to make sure that your users use the system in the correct way. You can avoid all the frustration, the confusion, and the money you're wasting in any other way. Now, think about that all, and let's put it all a bit together. And that's why I'm here. I'm a trainer. So what does actually good training do, and what does good training look like? Now, the biggest thing about training is that it should build confidence. People should have trust in the system, trust in themselves, are feeling confident that they can go in the system. They know what they need to do, and they know why they need to do it. And it's not just about compliance, about, okay, I have to make sure I click this box because otherwise my managers get angry. No, it should be like, I go in the system and I update information. I know I do it in the right way. And that means that I, as a user, get the right information displayed to me, and I can track it for my KPIs, for my performance, for my understanding. A lot of them, especially training, should be about explaining the why. What is the thinking behind it? Why do we as an organization, for example, want to make sure we have no opportunities with the data in the past? You know, why would we have that? Why is that important? If a user understands why it's there and why they can't have that, and understand what the benefit is in making sure your close data is also in the future, if they really understand why that is there, they will by themselves start making sure that data is correctly. And if we come with all kinds of complex reasoning, they're not going to follow it. So we need to keep it simple, straightforward. And if there's too much complexity or is too much buttons to click, then we can start thinking about, as an organization, about automation that then takes care of it. But then we make sure that we tell the users to say, okay, during training or during refresher sessions, we have now implemented this automation process to help you, because we know it's an annoying thing that you have to take care of. We fixed it for you, but still you need to make sure you check it and you keep up to date, but a lot of things will now be fixed for you. Also make sure training is role specific. And I always think it should be about a day in a life. For your user, what is important for them? A sales user needs completely different training than somebody who is from a call center, than somebody from finance, than an executive. So we need to make sure that whatever training we do is relevant for them. And even between teams, there might be differences. Maybe one sales team works slightly different than another sales team, or have slightly different information to look at. And so for all of that, we have to make sure that any training we do, we check what are we going to look at, what are the features that we're going to work through in this training, and who is relevant to get those features. And that's not just for the big training, it's also for the in-between rollouts. Make sure that when you do your 4-weekly, 8-weekly, or 3 times a year rollouts, make sure that you check what features in there, and you might need to change your messaging depending on different teams. All the training also should constantly evolve, because as a business, you are evolving. So if you as a business start doing different processes, rethink things, you have to make sure you go back to your training materials and update them and make sure they're relevant and to the point, and still convey the right messaging that you have as an organization. Now, all of that sounds like a lot, and it is, but at the same time, it isn't. It's all about, and that's what I always do, think about the end user. Always think about the person who's sitting at the desktop or maybe an iPad, that they maybe do things on a mobile app. How will the system work for them, and how can make sure that they do things right and they feel confident in doing right. To make sure that they feel happy, that they can do things the way we wanted to do, so that we as a organization, especially on, say, executive level, on higher level, have the confidence the information in the system is correct. We can use it for our strategic planning, our tactical planning, and know that what is in there, we actually know with a high level of confidence, it is what we're looking at is correct. And then we also know that when we then talk to someone, say one of our users, say, hey, you're doing well this month, it is actually correct. Or that we say like, hey, there's this whole range of issues here. We actually know there are true issues and we can deal with them. So we can plan as an organization our rollouts, our fixes around what are actually issues, instead of just figuring out and thinking like, well, we think maybe this is an issue. We can actually track information and feel confident the information in the system is correct, and therefore we can do correct decision making based on that. So my biggest takeaway for everybody is who listens to this is, what are you actually doing as an organization for your training and for your enablement? What are you doing in making sure that your users feel successful, feel confident? What is your planning? How do you work things out?